Are you tired of letting fear control your life? The truth is, fear is one of the biggest barriers holding us back from reaching our full potential. We all know that feeling. Your heart races, your mind freezes, and suddenly that dream or goal feels impossible. But here's the game-changing secret. The way to conquer fear isn't by avoiding it or waiting for it to disappear. It's by taking practical action, even when you're scared. Yes, you heard that right. In this video, we're flipping the script on how we approach fear. I'm about to share powerful, actionable steps that will help you face fear head-on and use it to propel you forward. No more waiting for courage to magically appear. If you're ready to stop being paralyzed by fear and start living a life driven by action, then you need to keep watching. I promise by the end of this video, you'll have the tools and mindset you need to take control and turn fear into your ally. Let's dive in. Number 1. Dive into the deep end. Confront your fear. Head on. Fear. It's that uninvited guest in your mind that loves to whisper, "What if you fail?" Or, "You're not ready for this." Here's a thought that might catch you off guard. The best way to deal with fear is not to tiptoe around it, but to dive right into the deep end. Yes, you heard me. Straight into the heart of what scares you most. Sounds reckless, right? But trust me on this. It's not about being reckless. It's about taking control. You know those moments when fear shows up and takes over? Like that time you couldn't hit send on an email you'd reread 12 times because what if they hate it? Or when you backed out of speaking up in a meeting because your voice suddenly felt too small. We've all been there, paralyzed by that what if loop. Fear convinces us to stay safe, to avoid risk, to not rock the boat. And sure, avoiding feels comfortable in the moment. But deep down, you know, it doesn't fix the problem. Here's where the deep-end approach comes in. When you dive into what scares you, you stop giving fear the chance to control the narrative. Let's break it down. Fear feeds on avoidance. The longer you dodge the thing, the scarier it seems. But when you face it head-on, you strip away the mystery. Your brain goes, "Oh, so this is it." Suddenly, it's not as terrifying as you built it up to be. Now, I know what you're thinking. Okay, but what if I fail? What if I'm not good enough? Good questions. Here's my answer. Failing is part of the process. Picture this. I was once terrified of public speaking. I'd make up excuses, avoid opportunities, and convince myself I just wasn't a speaker. One day, I got roped into presenting an idea at work. There was no way out. Heart racing, hands clammy, I stumbled through it. Was it perfect? Absolutely not. But something magical happened. I survived. More than that, I learned. The next time, it was a little easier. Let me tell you, facing that fear changed me. It wasn't just about getting better at speaking. It was about proving to myself that I could handle discomfort, that fear wasn't the boss of me. Diving into the deep end showed me I'm braver than I thought, and you are too. When you confront fear head-on, it's not just about tackling the external challenge. It's about reclaiming your sense of control, your courage, your dignity. Every time you face what scares you, you're rewriting the story in your mind. Instead of "I can't," it becomes "I did." And let me tell you, that feeling is powerful. So, next time fear comes knocking, don't inch toward it. Take a deep breath, hold your nose if you must, and dive right in. It's not about being fearless. It's about realizing you can handle fear and rise above it. Remember, your bravery isn't found in avoiding the deep end. It's in diving straight in and learning to swim. Number 2, fear bankruptcy. Cut all ties with what holds you back. What if I told you that fear is like a bad investment? You pour your energy into it, feed it with your doubts, and in return, it drains you, emotionally, mentally, sometimes even physically. here's the kicker. The longer you hold on to fear, the more it owns you. So, here's a bold proposition. Declare fear bankruptcy. Cut ties with everything that feeds it and start fresh. Radical? Maybe. But hear me out. We've all been there. You've got a big opportunity in front of you, but that nagging voice in your head won't shut up. What if I mess up? What will people think? Maybe I'm just not ready yet. Sound familiar? It's like carrying around a bag full of stones labeled what ifs and I can'ts. It slows you down, makes you second-guess yourself, and let's be honest, makes life way harder than it needs to be. Now here's the unconventional part. Cutting ties doesn't mean ignoring fear. It means systematically removing the things that give it power. Fear thrives on overthinking, toxic influences, and our own habit of holding on to the familiar just because it feels safe. To go bankrupt, you've got to stop feeding the system. That might mean saying goodbye to the perfectionism that paralyzes you, walking away from relationships that make you doubt your worth, or even unsubscribing from social media rabbit holes that leave you feeling inadequate. Let me tell you about the time I went fear bankrupt. I was stuck in a cycle of overthinking everything I posted online, rewriting captions, second-guessing photos, worrying about what people would say. It was exhausting. One day, I decided enough was enough. I unfollowed every account that made me feel like I wasn't good enough, stopped editing my posts to death, and hit publish without overthinking. The result? Freedom. The fear didn't disappear overnight, but without its usual fuel, it shrank to something manageable. Here's the beauty of fear bankruptcy. It's not about erasing fear altogether. It's about reclaiming your energy and redirecting it toward things that serve you. It's about realizing that the people, habits, and thoughts holding you back don't deserve that much space in your life. This is about creating room for growth, for peace, for joy. Imagine what you could achieve if you weren't so busy wrestling with fear every day. The next time fear has you in its grip, ask yourself, what am I holding on to that's keeping this fear alive? Then, let it go. Your peace is worth more than the temporary comfort of the familiar. So, go ahead, declare fear bankruptcy. Because the moment you cut ties with what holds you back is the moment you start building a life that moves you forward. Number 3, rehearsed chaos. Simulate your worst-case scenario. What if I told you that the best way to conquer your fear is to actually live it out? Not in a disastrous, life-ruining way, but on your own terms. It might sound strange, but there's a method to the madness. I call it rehearsed chaos. It's about simulating your worst-case scenario in a controlled, deliberate way, so that when life throws chaos your way, you're not just prepared, you're fearless. Let's face it, we've all played the what-if game. What if I mess up that big presentation? What if I forget my lines? What if everything goes horribly wrong and I make a complete fool of myself? These thoughts loop endlessly, and they're exhausting. We overthink, we freeze, and sometimes we avoid taking action altogether. It's like standing at the edge of a cliff, paralyzed by the fear of falling, even though you've got a perfectly good parachute strapped to your back. Now imagine this. Instead of avoiding that cliff, you practice jumping off again and again. That's rehearsed chaos. It's about creating a safe environment where you face your fears in a way that's manageable and even empowering. Why does it work? Because the brain is surprisingly adaptable. The more you expose yourself to a situation, the less intimidating it becomes. What once felt like the end of the world starts to feel like just another Tuesday. Let me share a story. A few years ago, I was terrified of being unprepared during job interviews. The fear of blanking out or saying the wrong thing would keep me awake at night. So, I decided to simulate the worst-case scenario. I asked a brutally honest friend to role-play an interview with me, throwing the toughest, most unexpected questions my way. At first, it was a disaster. I stuttered, froze, and laughed nervously. But then we did it again and again. By the third round, I was anticipating the tricky questions. By the fifth, I was nailing them. When the real interview came, I wasn't scared. I was ready. The beauty of rehearsed chaos is that it tricks your brain into seeing the feared situation as familiar territory. It's not about perfection, it's about building resilience, proving to yourself that even in the messiest of scenarios, you can survive, adapt, and come out stronger. This isn't just about interviews or presentations. Maybe you're afraid of speaking up in a relationship or handling an unexpected crisis. Whatever your fear, rehearsed chaos lets you take control of the narrative. It's about saying, "I see you, fear, and I'm not afraid to meet you head-on." By practicing your worst-case scenario, you strip away fear's power and replace it with confidence. This is about reclaiming your courage, your calm, and your clarity. Because when chaos shows up unannounced, you won't just survive it, you'll own it. So what's stopping you? Simulate the storm, rehearse the chaos, and watch yourself thrive. Number 4, the exposure diet microdose. Your fear. What if I told you the best way to overcome fear isn't to conquer it in one dramatic battle, but to nibble at it bit by bit? Sounds counterintuitive, right? But this approach, let's call it the exposure diet, is all about microdosing your fear. Tiny, manageable steps that help you build tolerance and confidence without overwhelming you. It's like training for a marathon by running a block at a time instead of sprinting all 26 miles on day one. We've all faced moments when fear feels too big to tackle. Maybe it's the fear of public speaking, making a difficult phone call, or even starting a new project. The very thought of it sends your heart racing, your palms sweating, and your brain spiraling into worst-case scenarios. You know the type. It's that overwhelming dread that makes you procrastinate, avoid, or flat out say, "Not today." And let's be honest, "not today" often turns into "not ever." Here's where the exposure diet comes in. Instead of trying to face the full force of your fear all at once, you take small, deliberate bites. Say you're terrified of public speaking. Instead of signing up for a big keynote speech right away, you start by practicing in front of a mirror. Once that feels less terrifying, you move on to speaking in front of a trusted friend. Then maybe you share your thoughts at a small meeting. Step by step, you're not just getting used to the act, you're proving to yourself that you can handle it. Let me share a personal story. A few years ago, I had an intense fear of networking. The idea of walking up to strangers and striking up a conversation felt like diving into a shark tank. So, I decided to microdose it. My first step? Smiling at one stranger a day, just smiling, no words. Once that didn't make me melt into a puddle, I moved on to small talk with a barista or a cashier. Eventually, I worked up to attending a casual networking event. And guess what? By the time I reached that event, it didn't feel like a shark tank anymore. It felt like a swim in the kiddie pool. The magic of this method is that it rewires your brain. Each small success chips away at the fear, showing your mind, "Hey, this isn't so bad after all." It's like building a muscle. You start with the light weights before you work your way up to the heavy lifting, and along the way, you gain not only skill, but also confidence and control. The exposure diet isn't about rushing or forcing yourself to be fearless overnight. It's about giving yourself permission to grow at your own pace, to celebrate the tiny victories, and to realize that fear doesn't have to be an all-or-nothing game. This is about reclaiming your courage, one bite at a time. So, take that first small step. Smile at a stranger, make the call, speak up. Because each tiny act of bravery adds up to something big. And before you know it, you're not just surviving your fear, you're thriving in spite of it. Number 5, fear fluency. Turn your fear into a language. What if I told you that fear isn't something to fight against, but something you can actually learn to speak? Sounds strange, right? But trust me on this. What if your fear could be like a new language, one that, once mastered, opens up a whole new world of possibilities? I'm not talking about dismissing fear or pretending it doesn't exist. I'm talking about flipping the script on fear and turning it into something useful, into a tool you can use, not something that holds you back. Now, I know what you're thinking. Fear as a language? That sounds a little out there. But hear me out. We've all been there, standing on the edge of something big, whether it's a new job, an important conversation, or even a life-changing decision. That feeling of fear, like a heavy weight in your chest, makes you freeze, second-guess yourself, or worse, back down entirely. It's the kind of fear that makes you say, "Not today," or "Maybe tomorrow." You know the type. It's that nagging voice that tells you you're not good enough or it's too risky. Here's the thing. Fear is a reaction, but it's also a signal. It's trying to tell you something. Think about it. Fear often appears when you're about to step outside your comfort zone, when something matters. And that's where fear fluency comes in. What if you could take that signal, decode it, and turn it into a conversation with yourself instead of an internal battle? It's like learning a new skill. The first time you feel afraid of something, it's overwhelming, right? You don't know the words, the phrases, or the structure. But the more you engage with it, the more you start to understand. The first time I gave a big presentation, I was terrified. The fear made my voice shaky, my mind scrambled. But I started paying attention to the sensations, those tight shoulders, the nervous energy, and I realized they weren't signs to stop. They were just the language of fear, telling me I was doing something important. Once I accepted that fear wasn't an enemy but a guide, I started responding differently. Instead of backing down, I embraced it. And guess what? The more I engaged with it, the more fluent I became. Now, don't get me wrong. This doesn't mean fear magically disappears. It's not about pretending it's not there. But when you become fluent in fear, you stop letting it control you. You learn to understand what it's telling you. When you feel that fear, instead of running, you lean in. You break it down piece by piece, like learning a new language. You start recognizing the signs of fear, understand its rhythms, and use that knowledge to your advantage. The beauty of this is that once you turn fear into a language, you're no longer intimidated by it. It becomes something familiar, something you can speak confidently. So, the next time fear shows up, instead of feeling paralyzed, try to listen. Ask yourself, what's it really trying to tell me? And then use that understanding to move forward with intention. Learning fear fluency is about reclaiming your space, your power, and your confidence. Fear no longer controls you. It becomes a tool you wield, not a force that holds you back. You're not just surviving your fear, you're thriving in it, speaking it, understanding it, and using it to fuel your growth. So, the next time fear comes knocking, don't run from it. Speak its language, and watch how it transforms from something terrifying into something empowering. Number 6. Tough love, accountability. Let someone push you. You know that feeling when you're stuck in a rut, making promises to yourself about how you'll change, do better, or achieve more. But somehow, nothing happens? It's frustrating, right? The intentions are there, but the action? Not so much. Here's a little secret. Sometimes the key to real change isn't in trying harder or being more disciplined. Sometimes it's about giving someone else permission to push you. Yes, I'm talking about that uncomfortable, tough love kind of accountability that we all secretly need but are often too proud to admit. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Who needs someone breathing down their neck, telling them what to do? Trust me, I get it. The idea of being pushed sounds, well, a little annoying. We like to think of ourselves as self-motivated, independent individuals, right? But here's the twist. What if I told you that tough love could actually be the missing ingredient for your success? That having someone who won't let you slack off, who holds you accountable, not out of criticism, but out of care, could be the boost you need to finally get things done. We've all been there. You set a goal, you get excited, you take the first few steps, but then life gets in the way, distractions creep in, and before you know it, that goal is just another unfinished project. You know the type. You tell yourself, I'll start again tomorrow, and tomorrow becomes a week later, a month later, or even never. It happens to the best of us. It's easy to slip into complacency when no one is holding you accountable. But this is where tough love accountability comes into play. Imagine this. You've got someone in your corner who knows your potential and isn't afraid to call you out when you're not showing up for yourself. Not in a mean or judgmental way, but in a, I know you can do better, and I'm here to make sure you do kind of way. It might sound harsh, but sometimes that's exactly what you need. Think about it. Having someone who checks in on you, who reminds you why you started in the first place, and who doesn't let you make excuses, can be the difference between stagnation and progress. I remember a time when I was working on a huge project, something that meant a lot to me, but I kept putting it off. I'd convinced myself it wasn't the right time or that I needed more preparation. It was my best friend who finally had enough and said, "Stop talking about it and just do it. I'm holding you to it, and I'm not letting you back out." She didn't sugarcoat it, but that push was exactly what I needed. I finally got moving, and guess what? I finished the project, and it turned out even better than I imagined. Tough love accountability isn't about being harsh or mean. It's about someone who cares enough to challenge you, to remind you of your potential, and to make sure you don't settle for less than what you're capable of. This is about reclaiming your commitment to yourself and your goals. It's about facing the reality that sometimes we need a little help in pushing through the discomfort of growth. It's not about being told what to do. It's about being reminded that you can do it. And sometimes that reminder comes in the form of a tough nudge. So here's the empowering truth. If you're stuck, if you're tired of making empty promises to yourself, it's okay to lean on someone else. Let them push you. Let them hold you accountable. When you do, you're not just proving your commitment to them, you're proving it to yourself. And in doing so, you'll unlock a whole new level of growth and self-respect. Because at the end of the day, you're worthy of someone pushing you toward your best self. Let them do it. Let yourself rise. Number 7, action over therapy. Stop overthinking, start doing. How many times have you found yourself stuck in an endless loop of overthinking? The what-ifs spin around in your head, and the longer you dwell on them, the harder it becomes to move forward. You've probably had moments when you just sit there, paralyzed by the fear of making the wrong choice, or worse, making no choice at all. It's exhausting, right? And let's be real for a second. How often does all that thinking actually lead to progress? Not much, if we're being honest. But what if the secret to breaking this cycle wasn't more thinking but more doing? I know. But wait, should I just jump in without thinking? Isn't that reckless? Now, hold on before you start second-guessing me. Trust me on this. Overthinking doesn't help you figure out the right answers. It just keeps you stuck. Action, however, creates momentum. It turns those what-ifs into real, tangible outcomes. So, here's the crazy idea. Stop waiting for the perfect moment. Stop analyzing every angle and start doing. Yes, doing. The more you act, the more you'll figure things out along the way. You don't need all the answers up front. You need the courage to take that first step. We've all been there, paralyzed by decisions, convinced that we need to know everything before we make a move. You've probably spent hours researching, reading articles, talking to people, and still ended up no closer to a decision. I know I have. You know the type. Feeling like you have to prepare yourself for every possibility before you can commit. But here's the kicker. While you're overthinking, the clock's ticking and life keeps moving on without you. And guess what? You're no closer to your goal. It's a trap. The truth is, progress isn't made in the mind. It's made in the doing. Let me tell you about a time when I found myself paralyzed by overthinking. I had this project I wanted to start, a big one, the kind that could change a lot for me, but also, the kind that terrified me. I spent days thinking about all the potential obstacles, worrying about the things that could go wrong, and wondering if I was even ready for something that big. I was trapped in analysis paralysis. Then, one day, I stopped myself. I realized that all my thinking wasn't helping. It was just keeping me stuck. So, I made a decision. I would start, even if I didn't have it all figured out. The first step was small, but it was a step. And you know what happened? I learned, I adapted, and I kept moving forward. That project, it became one of my biggest successes. It didn't happen because I thought about it endlessly. It happened because I took action. Here's the truth. This isn't just about doing for the sake of doing. It's about creating momentum, building confidence, and getting real-time feedback. Every time you take action, you learn something new, whether it's a success or a failure. That's how growth works. When you take action, you start to figure out what works, what doesn't, and what needs adjusting. It's not about perfection, it's about progress. So, if you're feeling stuck, overwhelmed, or unsure of the next step, just take one, even if it's small, even if you don't have all the answers yet. You'll be surprised at how quickly that one step turns into two, and before you know it, you're on your way. You don't need more therapy or self-analysis. You need action. Remember, action is the antidote to overthinking. So, take a deep breath, stop trying to predict every outcome, and start doing. This is your time to rise above the doubts and the worries, to reclaim your confidence and trust in your ability to figure things out as you go. Action over therapy. Because sometimes, the best way to move forward is simply to start. Number 8. Fail spectacularly. Make fear your performance. Art. What if I told you that the key to truly unlocking your potential lies in failing, not just failing, but failing spectacularly? Sounds counterintuitive, right? Most of us are taught to fear failure, to avoid it at all costs, like it's the ultimate disaster. But here's the kicker. What if we started embracing failure, not as something to avoid, but as an essential part of the creative process, a stepping stone to our success? Stick with me on this, because I'm about to flip your whole view on failure upside down. Now, I know you're probably thinking, wait, are you telling me to fail on purpose? Not exactly. But what if, instead of shying away from failure, you welcomed it? What if we made failure the performance art of our journey, something we could shape and sculpt like a masterpiece in progress? Yes, it sounds a bit wild, but hear me out. Failure isn't the end. It's a part of the process that teaches us, refines us, and in some cases can even launch us to new heights. Think about it. We've all been there, right? You try something new, you put your heart into it, and it all falls apart. The project crashes, the presentation flops, or the idea doesn't land the way you imagined. You feel that sting of failure, and it's tough. But here's the twist. What if that's actually the moment of transformation? What if, instead of running from that failure, you leaned into it, studied it, and let it teach you? It's about looking at failure as the canvas, not the end of the painting. Let me share a story with you. I once launched a project that I was sure would be a huge success. I spent weeks planning, strategizing, and pouring my energy into it. The moment I hit go, I had this rush of excitement, until within minutes everything started to fall apart. Technology glitches, miscommunications, and things just not going as planned. I was frustrated, embarrassed, and yes, a little bit devastated. But instead of retreating into shame, I took a step back and said to myself, this is the moment. This is where I learn. I analyzed the failure, picked apart what went wrong, and turned that moment into a stepping stone for the next project. And guess what? The next one, a massive hit. If I hadn't failed spectacularly the first time, I wouldn't have been ready for the success that came after. Here's the beauty of it. When you fail spectacularly, it doesn't just push you to try harder, it forces you to get smarter. You start to develop a sense of resilience that no amount of success can teach you. Failing, and failing big, forces you to confront your fears, your weaknesses, and your assumptions. It makes you uncomfortable, sure, but it also forces growth. And that discomfort, that's where the magic happens. So, instead of avoiding failure, lean into it. Celebrate it. Make it your performance art. Let each failure be a brushstroke in the masterpiece that is your life's work. You see, when you embrace failure as a tool rather than a roadblock, you unlock a level of freedom. It's about giving yourself permission to take risks, make mistakes, and be unapologetic about the learning process. It's about reclaiming your power, your confidence, and your ability to move forward with more wisdom than before. So, the next time you fail, and trust me, you will, don't hide from it. Don't over-explain it away. Don't try to smooth it over. Let it be your performance. Let it teach you. And then, when you're ready, rise again, stronger, sharper, and more prepared for whatever comes next. Because remember, failure isn't the end. It's just the beginning of something spectacular. Thank you so much for watching. I truly hope this video helped you see fear in a new light and gave you some practical tools to start taking action, even when it feels tough. If you found this valuable, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and allows me to keep bringing you content like this. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe for more insights on overcoming challenges and taking action toward your goals. If you know someone who might benefit from this message, go ahead and share the video with them. Let's spread this empowering approach to fear. I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments. What fears have you been facing, and what actions are you taking to push through them? Let's build a supportive community where we can all learn and grow together. Remember, fear doesn't have to hold you back. The moment you start taking action, you take control. Until next time, keep moving forward and trust that the small steps you take today will lead to big transformations tomorrow.